좀 어려우셨죠? 좀 혹시 질문, do you have any questions or 뭐 질문 혹시 있으신 분은 편하게 좀 손 들어서 말씀해 주시면 되겠습니다. 혹시 질문 있으세요? 네.
Thank you for the great presentation for your Quantstamp platform. I'm PhD student at Korea University, majoring security vulnerabilities in smart contract and the platform on the Ethereum. So one of my question is about your cases in the Binance. So I heard you guys are analyze all the contracts, all the coins listing on the Binance exchange, right? So I just wonder what kind of vulnerabilities and what kind of targets are your boundaries for analyzing the vulnerabilities? Yeah.
Do you want to
Answer. So for the Binance audit, so you can imagine like a typical audit. It's kind of like if you do a software audit, it's almost like you're designing antivirus software, right? So there's a lot of different types of ways to attack a smart contract. And specifically for Binance, we were looking at basically instances of integer overflow. So it was a batch overflow, which is in a batch transfer function, and proxy overflow. And so when you like isolate it to a very specific type of bugs, it's possible to use software and basically load all the token programs into the software and just check for those type of attacks. So that's basically what we did for Binance. Yeah. But like to actually automatically check a piece of code for arbitrary type of attack is actually a very difficult problem. So yeah.
So you mean you audited the binary of the
We basically audited the bytecode of every coin. So one thing is that actually because there's so many smart contracts that we looked at, not all of them make the source code available. So for our tool, we actually look at the bytecode. So that's basically you take the program and you compile it, and that's what's running on the Ethereum virtual machine. Yeah. Cool. Thanks.
혹시 또 질문 있으신가요? 한글로도 괜찮습니다. Any questions for the team? Oh, okay. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Brandon with Shuttle Capital. I had one question about the auditing staking model. I know you mentioned this is sort of like fresh off the presses, right? Just happening now. Like, who do you consider to be the other players that would sort of consider this model? Because I noticed that you mentioned that there would be multiple organizations that would potentially do this. My question is, like, who do you know if anybody else in the industry is exploring this as a business model? And two, would there be any major scoping concerns if you have multiple parties that are actually doing the same audit on the same contract itself?
Sure. I think this is a three-part. We're gonna hit this from multiple angles, right? So I'm gonna take the first hit at this. So basically, I think the issue we're trying to solve with staking is actually the thing you're referring to, like multiple parties doing an audit and having different scope, right? So for example, say like Jisoo here, he wants to do an audit, and Yang wants to do an audit, and Kay, who's not a programmer, he's doing an audit too. So when Kay does the audit, he's just gonna look at the code. He's like, looks good. I think it's all right. And he puts down, let's say, $10,000 that he thinks is all right, right? And Jisoo, basically, he's more confident, like because he's a trained security auditor. So and he has a bunch of ether lying around, so maybe he puts down like $50,000 worth. And after they're done putting down their stake, other people can see that Jisoo and Kay actually did an audit, and they can use that information and also decide whether it's secure. So if you think about it in that context, you're basically gathering the crowd intelligence from these auditors who individually they might be doing imperfect work. They might miss out on certain things in their scope, but by tying that work to a financial incentive that they can lose, it actually provides this kind of guarantee that currently it actually doesn't exist. So that's part one. So I gave it a shot there. Now I'm going to hand it to Jan.
I don't know what the other parts were. Are other people doing this? I think the answer is no for the most part. I think it's fairly no. If you know someone who's doing this, I want to know, because then it would save me some trouble. So, do you have anything else? Okay. Does that answer everything? Did we miss anything?
The obvious question then is, wouldn't there be, like for me, like wouldn't I want to make an auditing firm and then just sort of follow a firm I really like and stick behind them every time?
Yeah, you could do that, and you'd be happy. You'd be making some money as long as that contract's secure, and the contract owner would be happy because it increases what they'll get back if something goes wrong. So yeah, it's kind of a win-win marketplace, and we're aiming for that.
Another question or 질문 하나 단순한 것도 괜찮습니다. 편하게. 그러니까 한국에 처음 제대로 온 거라서 조금 네, 많이 알고 가셨으면 좋겠어요. 네, 혹시 질문 없으세요? 그러면은 okay, one more question.
So as I understand, this is basically like oral testing, right? So which stand like you guys thinking like okay, this is actually very much passed by security. Like for example, we can add many functions, right? So ERC20 we have interface, but without interface we can add any other functionality. So how you guys make sure the new functionality is actually secure or not? And then second question is smart contract is like you cannot change it once you upload to the blockchain. So how can you make sure this can be extendable? Like for example, like if I add a new functionality with a new smart contract, it can be able to communicate each other and then make sure this is secure as well.
Did you understand the question? Yeah. Part one.
Are you? Yeah. Okay. All right.
Okay. Part one.
I think the question was how in general can you automate finding bugs? I'm going to stand up here. Bugs or vulnerabilities, and I think you're kind of getting to the point. Well, for example, I may have this way of checking ERC20 tokens, for example, but somebody could add new functionality to it that I've never seen before. You're absolutely right. In fact, to do that kind of verification, you need to have a semantic understanding of the new functionality that's been added. And you may even want a formal spec so you can fully automate the checking. And often developers don't have the skills or knowledge to do this; they just don't do it. So I want to kind of distinguish between, let's say, general bug finding versus the kinds of automated checks, for example, that we do presently. So what we can do presently is detect certain classes of vulnerabilities, and these tend to be very specific to how code, for lack of a better description, runs on the blockchain. So, for example, there are so if your code has a dependency on the ordering of the transactions, so obviously a miner could just arbitrarily reorder them or try to reorder transactions in a way that favors something that the miner is incentivized by. This is something you can detect automatically. But other types of it actually begs the question: what is a bug even? For example, is integer overflow always a bug? Maybe for some reason I've written a program where I want this behavior. It's possible. Yeah, so, so the kinds of properties I'm talking about, for example, that are blockchain specific, it really doesn't matter if you add new functions. Those kinds of properties apply across any code that you would want to detect these. I think what you're saying. So, for example, if I say I can check ERC20 tokens, I might be doing some very specific kinds of checks specifically for ERC20 tokens and the behavior of all these different functions. You could do that. We don't actually do that, actually. So there's the one exception is we did this effort to detect the integer overflow with the what was it? Finance. Thank you. Which is something we wanted to do as a goodwill effort. But in general, what these analyzers do is they detect particular classes of properties. So when I say a class, I mean it's like a pattern, or it's a characteristic of any program. So even if you add new functions, it kind of doesn't matter. You may still introduce a vulnerability into your code in these that fits one of these classes of vulnerabilities. You may introduce this into your new code. But obviously, if I have some kind of analysis tool that's ERC20 specific, and I don't know, it does a bunch of tests involving like transferring tokens and make sure you have all the expected behavior, and you add something new, then that's a different challenge. But for automation, you want to automate the kinds of properties that you can check on all smart contracts. Does that make sense to you? Do you have a follow-up question? Okay, so let me explain this. I'll break it into two. So Quantstamp, we actually provide full service audits. So where we combine the use of automated tools with so-called white glove audits. So where we'll do manual code review, we'll do test, we'll analyze your test coverage. So yeah, in that case, certainly we're breaking your code apart and bashing it with everything we know to try to find some kind of vulnerability. So it's a combination of using automated tools and manual efforts as well. Yeah, that helped. Okay, and was there a second part? Yes. Well, so I think you're referring to, I've deployed the code, right? Now what happens? It's a big problem. So yeah, there are a couple of complementary security techniques that we mentioned. So the staking. Well, look. So staking doesn't correct your bug, but if your code is hacked, it can help protect you, protect you from the loss of funds. I also mentioned the notion of continuous monitoring. This is something we're developing in-house at the moment at Quantstamp. So the idea that we can actually monitor the transactions and try to notify somebody if there are patterns of transactions that indicate malicious behavior, then the contract owner may have the opportunity to pull the funds out before they're all stolen. So that's something else you could do. There are also I don't know this very well, but I know there are notions of upgradable contracts. So if a new vulnerability that, for example, there's research being done all the time. A new vulnerability is discovered, and we do a scan of all the contracts that are already deployed, and we may find out that a number of them have that vulnerability. I mean, it's a tough situation. So you may need to, if you have an ERC20 token, you might be forced to deploy a new token, and then certainly that can be a messy situation. So, when when I a year ago when I started learning about Ethereum and smart contracts, I mean, when it became very evident to me that there was a need for this kind of security service and automated checks. I mean, just the thought that you deploy your code and it has to be perfect. That's frightening. That's frightening. So yeah, the staking and continuous monitoring, these are two things that we're thinking about at Quantstamp. Yeah. You're asking, do we provide? So we, for example, we have a customer and we help them. We do a white glove audit, and then do we provide continuous support? We are exploring this at the moment. So continuous monitoring is one of the things that we're developing at the moment. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
또 혹시 질문 있으신가요? Final question. 네. 없으시면은 일단은 여기서 마치고요. 일단은 이렇게 긴 이제 발표를 해주신 퀀스탬 팀에게 큰 박수 한번 쳐주시겠습니다.